Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile, Congressman? Congressman, are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile, Congressman Gates? Are you a pedophile? Congressman, are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile, Congressman Gates?
Are you sure?
Weirdly enough, he did not respond to those queries, but that is Matt Gaetz obviously being hounded as he has at times been hounded for a couple of years now, ever since the accusations began against him of a variety of different crimes, with child sex trafficking being perhaps the most dramatic. Well, earlier this week, of course, it was revealed that the House Ethics Committee investigation into his alleged crimes is heating up once again, and it is in fact focusing on the child sex trafficking. But now on top of that, we also have new reports that seem to indicate what had already been rumored, that when not too many months ago, Matt Gaetz was one of those going hardest against Kevin McCarthy. Apparently, it was this probe into the sex trafficking that was the big motivator, which people have speculated about, but now there's more evidence of that. So if you weren't following the earlier news this week, sources said that the Ethics Committee has reached out to the DOJ requesting materials from its investigation, which included allegations of lobbying violations, sex trafficking, and possible obstruction of justice. The increased activity under Republican leadership is particularly notable, given that the committee probe was started by House Democrats in 2021. And one might expect that, like most probes begun under the Democrats, once the Republicans took over, this one would be swept away. But this one survived, and that probably bothered Representative Gaetz quite a bit. CNN reports that Gaetz apparently has privately blamed Kevin McCarthy for the committee carrying on this probe under his watch. McCarthy has repeatedly denounced those accusations and has said that Gaetz has worked to oust him because of it. So look, who is to say exactly what was the cause of the Republicans taking these accusations seriously when they take so few seriously? We do know that Matt Gaetz is not a particularly popular figure in Washington, even amongst other Republicans. So if you're Gaetz and you believe that they're only doing this because they don't like you, there's reason to believe that. But that also doesn't mean that the allegations aren't true. So in any event, I want to give you just one more quote, a bit of evidence to this. This was back in December. Kevin McCarthy told reporters, "We all know it's the ethics complaint on Gaetz. He's doing everything to make sure it doesn't come out, and he doesn't care about anything else. People study that type of crazy mind, right? Mainly the FBI." Which seems like a needless hit against him when he's already trying to get you kicked out of your job. But anyway, this is where we're at. We are waiting to find out what's gonna happen with this Ethics Committee investigation, which apparently is ramping up, but that doesn't mean that we'll know in the next few weeks or even months exactly what happened. And of course, Kevin McCarthy, he's already transitioned out of this story. Maz, I wanna start with you. What do you think about this feud?
Well, first of all, I know that the DOJ also investigated and did not continue the investigation, so I'm just wondering what happened there. But I will point out that this guy, seems smarmy enough to have done what he's been accused of doing. What's interesting is when Republicans get accused of this kind of stuff, they really, they kind of seem to get away with it. Now, in this case, we're saying that Kevin McCarthy might have been behind the probe and was trying to get rid of Matt Gaetz. But I'll remind you of Katie Hill, who was a Democratic congresswoman who was accused of having some sort of sexual conduct and smoking weed and the sort. And she was, she left Congress. Or Al Franken, there was pictures of Al Franken with, doing stuff that seemed inappropriate. A lot of Democrats were behind him leaving. The closest we've got right now in the Democratic Party is Bob Menendez, who is actually caught on certain things that seem like, again, he's guilty. But there are Democrats who say this guy is guilty. And so with Gaetz, the fact that this guy's gotten away so long, he looks smarmy, he is smarmy, he clearly has done stuff. But to the base, to the Republicans, this is fine because you're starting with the guy at the top who says he grabbed them by the blah blah, and then now just got fined for sexual assault. So it feels like in the Republican Party, it's fine. Like their supporters don't seem to care. So whatever the feud was between McCarthy and Gaetz, I'm just hoping that it all comes out and that Gaetz ends up leaving just like George Santos. I mean, it's just like, how hard, what do you have to do to get kicked out of Congress? It's like, if anybody was working at Starbucks doing this stuff, they'd have been fired. And yet in Congress, they're like, nah, you can stay on, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it absolutely tracks that someone like Matt Gaetz would throw the entire country into a tailspin just to protect himself, right? He's proven to be incredibly narcissistic. He was gaslighting an entire nation. He said, I'm not targeting Kevin McCarthy. And everyone was like, yes, you are. We all know that you are. We can see it. And he said, no, I'm not. And now it comes out that, yes, we were all right the whole time. And what is more disturbing about this, the most disturbing, I would say, is that it tracks that he wouldn't even care about the people of this country or the country itself. Because if you remember last year, I know it was a long time ago, all of this was happening at a time when we were trying to avoid a government shutdown, right? I think Congress had like a month in which they were trying to negotiate the budget. Ukraine was waiting for aid, and October 7th had just happened. So we needed a functioning government. And that was when Matt Gaetz decided to do this revenge, ousting, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. So none of that matters to any of these Congress people. And they're the ones who are in charge of running the nation and looking out for our well-being. They ran for public office because they wanted to become public servants. And this is what they do instead.
Yeah. Everyone, of course, bear in mind, as of right now, these are just allegations against the congressman. It hasn't been proven. And as Maz pointed out, the DOJ declined to move forward on charging him, which that does not fundamentally speak to whether the allegations are true or not. It could simply be concerns over how difficult it might be to prove. It could be that witnesses declined to participate. It could be all sorts of different things. So bear that in mind. It doesn't mean that he's guilty or innocent. And I'll close with my final thought is, like, my initial reaction would be, if you're Gaetz, why are you freaking out over this? I mean, if you're innocent, then what does it matter that this probe is going on in the background? Why act guilty? But if I'm being overly fair to a guy who hasn't given me much reason to be fair to him, if it is being continued just to hound you and maybe draw in a primary challenger or something, and if, let's say, it's actually not true, then if you were Gaetz, you would probably be furious about that. So you would want to strike out at a Kevin McCarthy. But maybe it is true. So maybe Kevin McCarthy, it's just like with George Santos, we can't have a guy like this in our caucus. So basically, I'm left with, in this story, there's understandable actions. There's really no bad guy, except for all of the guys who are bad. In a meta sense, fundamentally bad, but not necessarily inside of the pragmatic moves they're making inside of this story. In any event, the DOJ declined to move forward. It is entirely possible that the ethics committee will do that as well. Bearing in mind, of course, that like with George Santos, the ethics committee does not need to investigate, charge, and convict Matt Gaetz. They could put out a report, like with George Santos, that lays out really suspicious behavior, and that could potentially harm Matt Gaetz. So that seems more likely at this point, but stay tuned either way.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us, become a Young Turk.